a lot of NBA teams hope to get some luck or to add some clarity to the direction of their franchise on draft lottery night. The Atlanta Hawks got the number 1 overall pick last night in the draft lottery, which may clear up some things to roster that was already looking to make some serious changes at their point guard position. We're going to talk about some of the potential things that this opens up now for the Atlanta Hawks, what teams could be interested in trading for their assets. Plus, we're going to look at the Houston Rockets and another team that could use the draft position to add a big name talent to this team. We're going to look at all that and more right after this.
Welcome to the number one place for your daily basketball news and analysis, NBA Central.
What's going on, basketball fans? Welcome to another episode of NBA Central, your number one spot for everything basketball related. And the NBA draft lottery added a lot of clarity. Unfortunately, a team like the Detroit Pistons were by far the worst team in the game of basketball last season. They did not end up with the number 1 overall pick at all. And despite having the best odds, the Detroit Pistons wind up outside the top 4 positions completely at number 5 now. And that does suck for that team. But a team like the Atlanta Hawks and the Houston Rockets, two teams that both moved up considerably in this draft. When you look at the Houston Rockets moving up to being projected at number 9, all the way up to number 3. We'll talk about them a little bit in a second. But a lot of outlets now are talking about the Atlanta Hawks. And because they do have the number 1 overall pick, and albeit a projected weaker draft, right, as far as like superstar level talent, this is still a draft where you can get some damn good talent with some promising players in it. And with the Hawks now having that number 1 overall pick, it has shifted the focus to ask, are the Atlanta Hawks going to be looking to move Trae Young, DeJounte Murray? What are they going to do there? And one of the teams that had been rumored around interest in Trae Young was the San Antonio Spurs to pair him with Victor Wembanyama and what he's been able to do there. And we know that he needs a point guard. The San Antonio Spurs that have 2 picks in the top 10 in this draft as well, and that could be looking to really make a move. They sit at number 4. They also sit at number 8. Could they get involved with the Trae Young part of it? Well, for those that are asking that, it seems like that may not be on the radar as much as some people think. Mike Soto from Hoops Site says this. While some have floated the idea of the Spurs trading for Young in the media, league sources have said that the Hawks and Spurs didn't have substantive conversations about such a trade before the trade deadline. Time will tell in the coming months if that changes. However, heading into the lottery, those same league sources cast doubt regarding that changing in the future. Now, the Spurs are looking, theoretically, from what we've heard, to add a point guard to Victor Wembanyama, right? We already understand that. And you know, when you look at the Spurs and their chance to add 2 top 10 players in this draft, it may lean towards, hey, do you use those assets and maybe trigger the Atlanta Hawks to go full rebuild, which is something they may have been looking to do either way, to find that a point guard with Trae Young to pair with your superstar now in this league. Now, while the thought of that makes sense, and there aren't a lot of great point guard prospects in this draft that you can look to bring in, there are some really solid point guard prospects, right? Some mocks have them going after Rob Dillingham, who is probably one of the better point guard prospects in this draft that they could look to bring in out of Kentucky. He's drawn comparisons to Brandon Jennings and Colin Sexton as far as, you know, some comps to him. But the Spurs seem like, are they going to be willing to stay young for a little while, or do they want to jumpstart and maybe take advantage of while they have Wemby on a rookie scale contract to add a big name player to that is going to take and bring about a lot of salary cap with him along when you look at what Trae Young is going to be getting paid over the next couple of years. And that's where the Spurs have to weigh. Now, what do I think? Do I think the Spurs get in on a Trae Young type move? It's a potential there. I think when you look at DeJounte Murray, he's another one that does make sense that the Hawks are potentially looking to move on from as well. Now, do they look to move on from both of them? Do they look to move on from one of them? That remains to be seen. And he carries a much more cost-effective contract of $25 million next season versus the $43 million that you got to pay Trae Young next season as well. But, you know, maybe the money isn't really a thing to the Spurs, considering that they're building around Wemby and they have a nice amount of years before they got to worry about paying Wemby big money. So that's something that you have to look at there. And we'll see what happens. I would not be surprised if there are some discussions between the two sides that just kind of make sense when it comes down to that. And we'll see in the weeks leading up to the draft if they get involved. But one thing that you can't deny is that the Trae Young trade rumors are picking up. And so it really makes a lot of sense now because of the talent in this draft, a lot of outlets don't look at it as being necessarily franchise altering. Do the Hawks look to pair somebody with Trae Young and what they already have there? Do they look to move on from Trae Young, get even more assets back maybe in the future as they go a little bit younger with a player like Jalen Johnson, only 23 years old, that's really shined a lot for them as well? But he really offers him, AJ Griffin, maybe as their best young prospects that they have really there going forward. They have players on the contract in Bogdanovich. They have Clint Capella as well, who we know that they were looking to trade at the trade deadline. The Atlanta Hawks, sitting with the number 1 overall pick and having a roster that they were already rumored to be looking on to move on from a lot of these players, could really, not really disrupt. I don't want to call it disrupt, but they could really have a huge impact on what this offseason looks like for teams that are looking to add some pieces, teams that may be looking to move off some of their draft selections to get kind of more proven things now and compete. Those things are all possibilities that are at the feet of the Atlanta Hawks in this draft. So in no way am I saying that everything, the offseason goes through the Atlanta Hawks, but the Atlanta Hawks and what they decide to do with their roster could make a very big decision on what's going on with this offseason. So we talked about the Spurs. Another team that has been linked to Trae Young that could get involved in this is the Los Angeles Lakers. Now, we've heard that the Lakers, they're not against drafting Bronny, they keep LeBron James, things like that. But the Los Angeles Lakers were a team that held on to a lot of their pieces last year. And they did that with Austin Reeves, where there's some interest, and it took them out of the trade market for some players that could have absolutely helped them. With Trae Young coming available, and depending upon what, how now the Hawks view moving on from Trae Young, are they willing to take a little bit less as far as salary dumping, things like that? The Lakers could be involved in a potential Trae Young trade, and I think that that would kind of fall in line with what we've seen from the Lakers previously. They have Austin Reeves, who theoretically could pair nice with DeJounte Murray, and whatever they end up getting with the number 1 overall pick as well kind of determines upon that, right? And then they could be looking to include a young player like Jalen Hood-Schifino. They could be looking to include other players like Arua Hachimura at $17 million to kind of move on from those guys. Kind of the same pieces that they were rumored to kind of covet to keep, right? But they could be looking to move on from some of those guys if it meant bringing Trae Young to the Los Angeles Lakers. The biggest thing is, would the Hawks bite on that? And the Hawks' mindset and what they do with trades is really going to determine that. Is it about staying competitive, right, with building a better team, adding the young player you do at number 1, and then having DeJounte there, having maybe an Austin Reeves and a Rui Hachimura there is kind of to add to depth to that team, right? And not players that are too old either, not getting paid a whole hell of a lot of money. So those are potential moves there that the Los Angeles Lakers could do. But make no mistake about it, if much like when the Pelicans got the number 1 overall pick in the same offseason they moved on from Anthony Davis, right? Well, people kind of understood that was coming at that point in time. Or even last year, the Portland Trailblazers, them having a lot of pick, deciding to move on from Dame. This could be a offseason where a team is able to benefit from the Hawks going into just a different direction with their roster. But guys, let me know what you guys think down below if you're on the YouTube side. What do you think the Hawks should do? Do you think Trae stays with the Atlanta Hawks? Do you think he's more apt to be moved now? What are some of the teams you think could be in on a Trae Young trade outside of the Spurs, the Lakers, some of the other rumored teams around him? Let me know that down below. Now, another team that could really make some changes and some waves this offseason because of where they pick at is the Houston Rockets. I already talked about earlier in the show how the Houston Rockets moved up. They had a really good night on draft lottery, moving from the 9th spot all the way up to number 3 in this draft. And the reason why this is, right, when you look at why this could become interesting, and ESPN Zach Lowe really floated this out as well, that it adds complexity to the offseason strategy by the Rockets. The Rockets are a team that, disappointed throughout the season. They had that run towards the end of the season where it looked like they were going to be able to make a march for a play-in spot, things like that. It didn't end up happening. Cool. It kind of is what it is there. But the Rockets sit in a place where, do they want to get younger, or do they want to take advantage now of having this number 3 overall pick and maybe go and search for a team that may be trading off a veteran that can help this team move now? The Houston Rockets sit in a place where this offseason, they can move up to 5 first-round picks. Now, all those picks aren't in this draft, but they can move up to 5 first-round picks, as well as some of the young talent that they have on that roster to try to get a star-level player in here and help jumpstart their rebuild process as well. A team that finished at 500, 41-41. Yeah, they went on the great win streak to end that season, but having Ime Udoka there, right? Having Alfred Sengun, who really showed a lot in the way that he grew as well last season. This could be an offseason where the Houston Rockets really look to make a move to bring in some more proven assets rather than continue to get younger. When you look at some of the players that the Houston Rockets have showed interest in, Miles Bridges has been one of those players that they've showed an interest in as well. Now, kind of the talk around Miles Bridges has kind of come down some, but the Brooklyn Nets, a team that gave up a lot of first-round picks before in trades, maybe they can be looking to recoup some of those back in other areas as well. So it depends on, do the Rockets look for the long-term thing? Do they want to build over time like some of the teams that are sustainable, or do they look for immediate help right away to kind of help that team fight, compete for playoffs, and up themselves? It really comes down to, how does Ime Udoka really want to compete with his team? Him, the front office, what do they really want to do? And they have a lot of low salaries on that team right now for first, second year, very young players. And so because of that, they could look to, bring in a veteran now, or they could very well look to keep on to number 3, stay young, build organically over time. It really comes down to what the mindset of the Houston Rockets is this offseason and in what deals are available, right? They've already been reported that they're going to be taking calls on the number 3 overall pick. In those calls, do they get or hear a deal that they feel can really change the outlook of what that team can be going into next season? That's the questions that they're going to be asking themselves. And it's a good place to be in, right? When you have a pick that you were expected to pick in the top 10, but now you're considerably higher than what even that was expected to be. Do you look now to move on from that? Do you look now to move on from that and potentially go in a different direction with your roster and try to get, there are going to be some disgruntled stars out there. There are going to be some teams that look to maybe blow it up, that want a bite at a number 3 overall pick and may be willing to give up somebody who is on a decent contract now, but they can go younger. That's some things to look at for as well. I'm not going to throw out a bunch of teams there, but there are teams that could be interested in that. I think that's going to tell the difference in this story for the Houston Rockets and what they do with this number 3 overall pick. Like I said, really good position to be in. Depending on how you look at it, you're either going to add a really good young talent. If you trust your scouting department, you're going to trust what you can bring in there, or you're going to be looking at to move on and go in a different direction and, maybe not bring in any more young talent and bring in some proven guys that are going to help the young talent that you have here, some young talent that you already have here on this roster, and make it, be better, make it develop a little bit more. So those are things that you're really looking at for, I think, at this in this offseason after the trade deadline. Listen, it is going to get very interesting. I already thought that this was going to be a really fun and interesting offseason, but kind of the way that the draft lottery worked out, the fact that you had so many teams move into that top 4 that were outside that top 4 this year, that changes a whole hell of a lot for a lot of teams. And the question is now, who decides to bite? Who decides to move on from their draft picks and wants to bring in young talent? That's the biggest question here. And so we'll end up seeing what that's going to be. But guys, let me know what you guys think down below. When you look at kind of the teams picking in the top 10, what are some of the teams that you think are more likely to maybe move on from that draft pick, and who you think they can pursue if that happens? Let me know that down below, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you guys are following the show at NBA Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, NBA Central Show at gmail.com. And then lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the number 1 spot for everything everything basketball related. I host Chicago Bulls Central too. There you go. Everything basketball related. And I'll see you guys the next time I feel like making a video, probably tomorrow. Peace, y'all.
This has been a presentation of the Breaks Media.